Evil may rise, but it cannot last where truth stands firm. Throughout the ages, humanity has watched evil rise in many forms: hatred, violence, injustice, greed, and oppression. These forces often appear unstoppable. They come like a storm, fierce and unrelenting, tearing through the fragile fabric of peace and dignity. Empires have risen on the backs of the oppressed, kings have ruled through fear, and men have turned on their brothers with cold hearts and closed minds. But every single time, even in the darkest hours, even in the depth of night, the presence of truth has never disappeared. It has flickered like a candle in the wind, but it has never gone out. Truth is not loud, but it is powerful. It does not always roar, but it always remains. When evil comes like a flood, it may sweep away the weak structures of lies and illusions, but it crashes and breaks when it meets the solid rock of truth. History has proven this time and again. Slavery seemed permanent, but it fell. Colonialism thought itself eternal, but it crumbled. Tyrants built towers of terror, but even they could not stand against the testimony of people who dared to speak the truth, to live the truth, and to die for the truth. Truth is a moral compass that cannot be twisted by the hands of time or the tongues of deceivers. It has a patience that evil cannot match, and a strength that injustice cannot defeat. Truth does not yield to the cruelty of men. It outlasts the regimes of the wicked. It survives the prisons built for profits. And it shines through the bars of injustice with a light that evil cannot dim. There have been moments when evil appeared to win the day, when voices of conscience were silenced, when dreams were buried, and when justice was delayed. But even in those moments, truth continued to work silently and steadily in the hearts of the faithful, in the voices of the few, in the courage of those who refused to bow. Evil may dominate a chapter, but truth writes the book. Evil may claim the battlefield, but truth wins the war. Truth does not need a crowd to be real. It does not require applause to have power. Even when it stands alone, it stands undefeated. And when people gather around it, when they choose it over comfort, when they carry it like a torch into the night, something holy begins to stir. Movements are born, walls begin to fall, chains begin to break. Evil senses that its reign is nearing its end. Evil thrives in silence, but truth finds its voice. It speaks in the cries of the innocent, in the songs of the oppressed, and in the sermons of those who dream of a better world. It does not rest, and it does not retreat. It may be challenged, but it cannot be conquered. The tide of justice is stronger than the waves of oppression. Oppression has a way of presenting itself as unshakable. It shouts through systems, policies, and broken promises. It marches through the streets with arrogance, cloaked in uniforms and laws that are bent against the weak. It builds walls, digs trenches, and sets traps to keep power in the hands of the few and chains on the souls of the many. It silences voices, suppresses truth, and buries dreams. But even the tallest walls tremble when the tide begins to rise. Even the strongest chains rust when justice begins to move. Justice is not a gentle stream, it is a mighty tide, and when it moves, it brings with it the strength of every soul that has ever cried out for dignity. It is fed by centuries of struggle, lifted by generations of faith, and driven by the deep yearning of human hearts for freedom. You cannot stop the tide with a hand, nor hold it back with a threat. It comes when it's ready, and when it comes not just to touch the shore, but to transform it. Oppression is loud in the beginning. It shouts with confidence, believing the silence of the oppressed is consent. It relies on fear, builds on ignorance, and thrives in the absence of resistance, but justice is born in silence. It begins with a whisper in the soul, a stirring of conscience, a restless longing for change. It builds slowly, but it builds strong. With every injustice exposed, it gains force. With every truth spoken aloud, it gains momentum. With every act of courage, every protest, every prayer, every hand extended in solidarity, the tide rises higher. The oppressor counts on weariness, on apathy, on division. But justice is patient. It waits for the moment when people can no longer look away, when the burden becomes too great and the pain too personal. Then, like a tide pulled by the unseen force of purpose, it begins to swell, and once it starts, it does not stop. It crashes into the shores of privilege. It sweeps away the lies dressed up as policy. It washes clean the polluted hands of history. It brings with it not just a reckoning, but a renewal. Justice does not come to settle the score. It comes to restore the balance. It rises not with hatred, but with hope. It is born from love for what is right, not vengeance for what was wrong. And though oppression may roar like thunder, though it may dig its claws deep into culture and tradition, it cannot withstand the relentless pull of what is true, what is fair, what is good. The tide will rise because it must rise. It is the nature of justice to move forward, to break barriers, to find every hidden corner where oppression still breathes and push it back with unyielding power. Light will always find a way to pierce the darkest storm. No matter how thick the clouds of despair, no matter how loud the thunder of hate, light is never extinguished. It may be hidden for a time, obscured by the weight of suffering, but it lives on, burning quietly in the hearts of those who still believe, who still hope, who still stand. Darkness can terrify, intimidate, and confuse. It can make the strongest stumble and the bravest grow weary. But light does not depend on strength or numbers. It does not need permission to shine. It only needs one soul willing to carry it forward, one voice brave enough to speak in the silence, one heart bold enough to believe in a better day. Storms are fierce. They come with chaos, winds of hatred, and torrents of injustice. They shake the foundations of peace. They destroy trust, divide communities, and test the resolve of the righteous. Yet no storm lasts forever. The wind howls, but it tires. The rain falls, but it ceases. And just when it seems all is lost, the first ray of light breaks through, not with noise, but with presence. That is the power of light. It does not argue with the darkness. It simply exists, and in its existence, the darkness begins to fade. Every movement for justice began with light in the midst of a storm, a voice in the wilderness, a cry from the shadows, a refusal to be silent. From prison cells to protest lines, from pulpits to courtrooms, light has moved forward even when the storm told it to turn back. It does not rush, but it does not retreat. It does not boast, but it cannot be ignored. It reveals, it heals, it inspires, and it gives people the courage to walk through the storm instead of waiting for it to pass. There are moments when the darkness feels endless, when the night seems to stretch beyond the horizon, when cruelty feels like the final word. But light reminds us there is more. More to see, more to feel, more to become. It reminds us that every unjust system built in shadow will one day be exposed, that every lie told to divide will be undone by truth, that even in a world drowning in fear, the smallest act of kindness can open the sky. The beauty of light is that it belongs to everyone. It is not bound by race, by class, or by status. It is the common inheritance of all who dare to believe in goodness, and when we carry it together, when we share it, protect it, and let it guide us, its reach multiplies. It becomes a beacon not just for ourselves, but for those still lost in the storm. Even a single flame can hold back the night, and once the light breaks through, the storm loses its power to blind. We march not in hate, but in holy defiance of evil. There is a difference between rage and righteousness, between vengeance and vision. Our steps are not guided by bitterness, but by belief. We do not rise because we hate those who oppress us. We rise because we love what they seek to destroy, justice, dignity, peace, and the sacred worth of every human being. We walk not with fists clenched in fury, but with hearts open to truth. This is no ordinary march. It is a moral movement, rooted in the soil of sacrifice and watered by the tears of generations who refuse to give up. Holy defiance is not loud or violent. It is steady, resolute, and unstoppable. It comes from a deep place inside where conscience meets courage. It is the fire that burns in the eyes of the humble, the strength that carries weary bodies another mile, the clarity that allows the oppressed to see their chains not as destiny, but as challenge. We march not to destroy, but to awaken, not to curse the darkness, but to light the path. Evil expects resistance to mirror its cruelty, but when we respond with principle instead of poison, with peace instead of panic, we disrupt its grip on the world. The world tells us that hate is power, that anger is strength, that violence is the only language the powerful understand. But history tells a different story. Every great movement that shaped the soul of society rose not with swords, but with sacred conviction. It was the quiet refusal to sit at the back of the bus, the bold decision to kneel instead of shout, the patient endurance of those jailed for truth, not for crime. Holy defiance breaks chains because it refuses to become the very thing it stands against. When we march, we carry more than signs. We carry stories. Stories of mothers who prayed for justice, fathers who worked without reward, children who dreamed beyond their circumstances. Each footstep is a testimony. Each chant is a declaration. We do not march to prove our strength, but to demonstrate our faith. Faith in the idea that love is greater than fear, that truth is mightier than force, that right is more powerful than wrong, even when wrong wears a crown. Our defiance is holy because it is born of love, not hate, because it seeks to redeem, not to punish, because it lifts others up rather than casting them down. It is holy because it sees even the enemy not as a monster, but as a soul in need of light. Evil cannot comprehend such defiance. It is confused by compassion, weakened by wisdom, and ultimately undone by hope. Every step we take in peace is a strike against the foundation of injustice. Every song we sing in courage is a wound to the system that seeks to silence us. We do not rise to dominate. We rise to liberate. Hope is the shore where evil comes to die. When the storm rages and the sea of despair rises high, it is hope that stands at the edge, unmoved, unwavering, waiting like a lighthouse guiding the broken toward safety. Evil thrives in hopelessness. It feeds on fear, on silence, on the belief that nothing will ever change. But the moment hope is born in a single heart, evil begins to tremble, because hope is not weakness. Hope is not wishful thinking. Hope is defiance. Hope is strength wrapped in stillness. It is the soft but stubborn refusal to let darkness write the final chapter. Hope is not naive. It knows the weight of suffering. It has walked through fire, sat in prison cells, buried dreams, and endured injustice, and yet it rises, not because the world is already just, but because it dares to believe that justice is possible. Hope is what gives a mother the strength to send her child to a school across a violent divide. It's what allows a man to stand in court and speak truth to power when the cost is high. It's what fuels communities to rebuild again and again, even when the world has turned its back. Hope holds a mirror to evil and says, "You may have ruled the night, but the morning is mine." Evil cannot survive where hope flourishes, because hope gives people vision. It awakens the imagination, stirring belief in things yet unseen. It turns passive bystanders into active participants. It teaches the weary how to sing again, how to stand again, how to fight again, not with fists, but with faith. Hope is what gave rise to movements, revolutions, awakenings. It is what filled the souls of slaves who sang spirituals in the fields, what stirred the hearts of protesters who marched without weapons, what kept the dream alive when bullets tried to silence it. Hope does not erase pain, but it transforms it. It gives meaning to struggle and breathes purpose into sacrifice. It connects us to something greater than the moment, something eternal and divine. That is why evil fears hope more than it fears any army. Because where hope lives, people rise. Where hope lives, chains fall. Where hope lives, walls crack, systems shake, and the tide begins to turn. No matter how vast the sea of suffering, it always ends at the shore. And that shore is not made of sand or stone. It is built of hope, pressed together by courage, sealed with conviction. People often look for signs of hope in headlines or leaders, but real hope is planted in everyday acts of courage. It is born when we choose to see light in each other, when we choose to believe in redemption, when we extend our hands instead of turning away. Hope is quiet, but it is not passive. It is humble, but it is not weak. It is what evil cannot kill, because it is what keeps rising every time the world says stay down. When love leads, even the sea surrenders its fury. Love is not merely a feeling. It is a force, a power so deep and wide that even the storms of hatred and injustice cannot match its reach. It is the quiet commander of revolutions, the gentle architect of lasting change. When love takes the lead, fear begins to retreat. When love stands at the front, violence loses its grip. Because love, real love, does not flee from the fire, it walks into it to carry others out. It does not raise its voice to overpower, it speaks truth that cannot be silenced. The sea, with all its chaos and rage, represents everything in the world that seeks to overwhelm us, systems built on cruelty, voices shouting division, history soaked in sorrow. And yet even the sea must bow when love stands tall, not because love shouts louder, but because love is deeper. Love does not need to match the fury of evil. It needs only to endure, to remain present, to be willing. That is its power. Love can face injustice and not mirror its bitterness. It can confront hate and not lose its heart. It can move through the storm without becoming the storm. When love leads, it does not look for easy answers. It does not deny pain or cover wounds with false smiles. Instead, it listens, it lifts, it leans into the discomfort and chooses to stay when walking away would be easier. Love builds bridges over troubled waters and pulls down walls that divide. It dares to imagine a world where dignity is not earned but honored, where mercy is not weakness but wisdom, where power is not used to dominate but to serve. The world has always tried to convince us that might makes right, that cruelty is necessary, that revenge is strength. But every time love has led, history has turned, kingdoms have fallen, empires have bent, movements have risen, and people, once broken and forgotten, have found their voices. When love leads, enemies become neighbors. Wounds begin to heal, chains fall not just from wrists, but from minds and hearts. Love does not ask us to be perfect. It asks us to be present, to show up for one another, to hold the line when others let go, to believe even when it would be easier to doubt. It asks us to see the humanity in those who wrong us and the light in those who differ from us. It is the highest call we can answer, not because it is easy, but because it is eternal. Love remains when power fades. It speaks long after the noise has passed. It builds where others destroy. It guides where others confuse. There is nothing passive about love. It confronts wrong. It challenges systems. It demands justice, but it does so without becoming the thing it fights. That is the miracle of love. It can carry the weight of pain and still walk in grace. It can stand in the face of fury and not flinch. It can lead us through the storm, past the fear, beyond the violence, into a new dawn.